Anneliese Dodds, what did you feel while you were watching the Princess of Wales broadcast yesterday?
I think I probably felt very similar to the many people who will have watched that broadcast. I felt a huge amount of sympathy for her. Obviously, this is an incredibly difficult time for her, as for anyone with that kind of a health situation, and I really want to wish Her Highness well. I think she's also spoken with a huge amount of hope and optimism, and people who are in a similar situation, I'm sure, will take a lot of comfort from her words, saying that we do have to have hope and need to think of each other when people are facing cancer.
Thank you. Well, let's turn to this morning's news. The Chancellor said that looking at the situation in Russia, he has very little trust in what we're being told by Mr. Putin and the Kremlin, but that this is obviously a very serious issue. What's your reaction to what we've seen over the last 48 hours?
Well, clearly the terrorist attack in Moscow was absolutely horrendous, and wherever terrorism rears its ugly head, we have to utterly condemn it and offer our condolences to all of those impacted. And clearly this is a very concerning time, and I think those remarks from the Chancellor about the response are ones that should be heeded. It's really important that this is investigated properly and that those who genuinely were responsible are actually brought to book. That surely is the most important thing for the sake of the Russian people. And of course, it was innocent Russian civilians who were targeted in this heinous attack.
Let's turn to the economy. The Shadow Chancellor made a big speech this week, setting out her approach to the economy. So let's talk about what Labour might do. And let's start with Lord Mandelson's warning this morning that Angela Rayner's proposals for workers' rights, enhanced workers' rights, may need to be moderated a bit because business leaders are saying that this will pile costs on. Do you take what he says seriously?
Well, it's really important that we ensure that work pays in our country, and it doesn't right now. We've seen, unfortunately, stagnating living standards. In fact, this Parliament will probably be the only one in recorded history where living standards are going to be lower at the end of the Parliament than they were at the beginning. So we need to ensure that work pays. That's the motivation for Labour's New Deal for working people. And the measures in that New Deal would actually increase productivity. They would put more money in workers' pockets, and they'd also boost the conditions for innovation as well. And of course, those proposals will be delivered in a way that's in the interests of business as well as in the interests of workers. But that's fundamental to the Labour Party. We're a pro-worker and pro-business party, and that really is at the heart of our New Deal for working people.
Well, when you say you're pro-business and pro-worker, in some situations you can't necessarily be exactly both, can you? Because, for example, I noticed that the Shadow Chancellor did not say in her speech this week that you would ban 0 hours contracts. She seemed to be saying that there would be some conditions around 0 hours contracts, but you've come a long way from a year or so ago when the Labour position was clearly to ban 0 hours contracts, or have I got that wrong?
With a huge amount of respect, I think perhaps you have got that wrong. Labour's always been clear that with all of these measures, they need to be implemented in a way that preserves the good of what we see in the labour market. And we were always clear that there needs to be flexibility available for particular types of work. The problem at the moment, however, is that flexibility too often...
Can I just stop you for a... Can I just get absolutely clear? So there's not under Labour, there will be no ban on 0 hours contracts, because I know many people who think that is what Labour said.
Well, we are going to ban them, and I can set out the detail of that if it's of interest. We've said that there should be an assessment period to understand the pattern of people's hours and then ensure that people's contracts reflect that. Now, the reason why we've said that is because we've got huge numbers of people in our country who are repeatedly and repetitively on these 0 hours contracts when they could have a contract that actually reflected the hours that they work. If they had one that was more reflective of what they actually do in the workplace, that would provide them and their family with far more stability. And actually, this is really important for productivity in our country. And if I may, Trevor, you mentioned Rachel's speech. I read that excellent speech, the May's lecture, and she was really clear about how important that new deal with those provisions to make work pay, how important that is for boosting productivity in our country.
Well, actually, not everybody agrees. She uses words securonomics. Labour's biggest trade union backer, the boss of Unite Union, Sharon Graham, said the following about it. Rhetoric about abstract concepts and ripping up building regulations and tinkering in the public sector are not going to deliver serious growth. That's for the birds. If you can't even explain it or persuade your own backers, how are you going to convince the voters?
We certainly can explain it. And as I just set out to you, that new deal for working people is designed to ensure that work pays, that we boost productivity, that we get more money in workers' pockets, and that we ensure better conditions for innovation. And those measures are ones that Labour hasn't just dreamt up. They're ones that actually we've formulated in discussion with business, with trade unions, and above all, with working people, listening to working people. We can't continue in the situation, Trevor, where we've got huge numbers of people living in such precarious circumstances.
Can I just come back to get clear what you're saying? Because what Sharon Graham seems to be saying is that either the measures that you're clear about are too small, and the larger measures you're not that clear about. So, for example, Shadow Chancellor said, we have become at once too open to trade, but also too closed to global trade. Which is it? Are we too open or are we too closed?
Well, that was exactly Rachel's point. We've become too open when it comes to...
Are we too closed or are we too open?
I'll just explain. We've been too open and we've not protected sufficiently those mechanisms within our country that are so important. For example, at the times of a global pandemic, it was very clear that we hadn't done enough work on ensuring domestic supply chains and domestic production. That's why Rachel has said, in particular, for the jobs of the future, that we need to make sure those green jobs, those jobs in AI and so forth, that they're actually within our country. So in that sense, we've been too open, but we've been too closed when we see that huge amount of red tape, frankly, that's holding back British business on trading. So I think it was really clear what she said, actually.
OK, just to get... OK, well, let me just ask, I suppose, the fundamental question that everybody's still asking about Labour. Shadow Chancellor says she won't borrow for day-to-day departmental spending. She won't raise income taxes. She won't raise corporation tax. She won't reverse the national insurance cuts by Mr Hunt. But she's going to fund the NHS more. She's going to spend more on education. And she's going to provide more childcare. How's all that going to happen?
Because we have a plan. We've got a plan for economic growth. The Tories
have had a plan too.
Well, the Tories have had 12 plans, and as I know that viewers of this will be aware, every single one of those 12 plans have failed, and they've failed because they've not included the elements that Rachel is determined to enact for Labour if we're given that chance to serve, because they've not delivered economic stability. Rachel set out how she would do that. They've not delivered the investment that we need. Again, we set out how we do that with a sovereign wealth fund we would create. And they've not delivered on reform either. They haven't delivered the changes we put in place to get Britain building again.
Anneliese Dodds, thank you so much for your time this morning. And no doubt we'll carry on talking about this for several months.
I hope so.